Tim, super excited to have you on. I really appreciate it.
I've been looking forward to this. At a
CPA of some sort,
exactly, and miserable as the day is long.
It's a leap of faith.
It's a huge leap of faith. I got married a little bit later in life, so at the time, I literally just had to pay rent.
The first year, did you make any money?
You can't pick a side. The moment you pick a side, you're in trouble.
You've changed the word "and" for me. Or I'll say highlighted. Or exposed through COVID.
100%. And by embracing healthy independence, we've had efficiencies.
Really?
I know. And
ouch.
That stung.
Hurts, yeah.
And you do this for a living?
they
they see the
you for that,
hotels
Ted?
and they see it. And I'm like, there is hard work behind it.
The lavish. Like you got paid what for talking for an hour?
Exactly.
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence.
Tim, super excited to have you on. I really appreciate it.
I've been looking forward to this. This is a fun experience.
That's awesome. So I think of leadership development. I think of team building, and like your head pops in my mind. And you've been so well known, not just in this community, but globally. You're working with clients like United Nations, Royal Bank, Siemens, Toyota. You have an incredible resume. You've got 2 beautiful children, beautiful wife. You're living right here down the road in Jordan. We had an opportunity to meet, what do we figure, 2017? Mm-hmm. Not quite a decade ago, and we can maybe go back to that one. But tell me the story about your background. Where are you from? How did you get here?
Oh, the origin story. Well, I grew up about 3 hours away in rural Sarnia, Ontario, came to the big city of St. Catharines to go to university. At the time, that was a big leap to go to Brock in 92. And I came to study accounting. That was going to be my trajectory. Absolutely. You
Why
didn't
accounting?
know that.
I didn't know that.
You know what? It was one of those things where I was from a family where post-secondary wasn't really a thing. So it was a new conversation for us. I went to the guidance counselor. They said, "You're great in math. Accounting is a great profession. There's jobs, there's money." I'm like, perfect.
Sounds good.
So looked at the options. Brock was a great one. Came here. And it was interesting. I certainly loved my experience at university, but realized pretty quickly after a few work terms that the field of accounting probably wasn't going to be for me. I was super fortunate that the university also had this incredible outdoor training center, and I got a job there generally to help pay rent, but leading high ropes courses and outdoor expeditions, and it was the opportunity to start working with adult groups and corporations and teams. And, this little side gig that I was doing to pay rent really opened my eyes to the type of work that kind of made me come alive. So that resulted in doing that type of work, different parts of the world. I started to work at a guest ranch out in the state of Wyoming. I was doing more and more outdoor adventure-based work, and realized as my university years came to an end that accounting was going to serve me well, probably, in my life, but not be my vocation.
Sure.
So I got into working with adult groups and corporations right out of school, but more on the outdoor adventure side. So everything from high ropes courses to paddling expeditions. And as the years progressed, a lot of that work moved itself indoors, but still revolve around building teams and helping leaders unlock their potential. So it's interesting because I've got kids now, one going into high school this year, and you're having these conversations around you want to have an idea of what makes you come alive, what you're great at, and have a plan, but hold it loosely. Because if I would have held on too tightly, I'd probably be at a
CPA
desk.
of some sort.
Exactly,
yeah.
And miserable as the day is long. So
yeah, for sure.
It worked out well, and I was super fortunate to have doors open and opportunities present themselves.
So you're in university, you get this experience, but go back even a little further as far as did you just gravitate towards it, or tell me about your family? I mean, I feel like there has to be some values that you guys live that was really embedded in you before you just said, "Hey, I like helping people."
Yeah, so we were a pretty conservative upbringing, a strong religious background, and that has both amazing results and challenging results. One, I think, amazing outcome of that upbringing is the idea of difference making and recognizing that, what you've been given has been given to you to help and make a difference in the lives of others. And that, I believe, was instilled in me from a young age, and something that I value and certainly have tried to carry out with my kids and with my friendship circle. So yeah, I feel like those are the things that really do carry through in most areas of your life.
It's amazing. Okay, so tell me about your first entrepreneurial experience. When was it when you finally said, "Hey, I'm gonna do this thing on my own"?
Oh, this is going back. I again went home, near the end of my university career, to kind of announce to my family that I wasn't going down the road of accounting, that I was going to kind of move into more something, guiding groups, working with corporate groups. Of course, I had no idea what any of that meant. So they were wonderful to say, okay, good luck.
we love you, we support you.
Yeah, exactly. But I have no idea what you're talking about. But I had a lot of ongoing work with a few key Canadian banks. So I just worked for the bank, and that worked for them. They're like, okay, good, you got a job.
Good selling people.
But what happened was, as I graduated, I started to do a lot of facilitation with different organizations, mainly Toronto-based. And again, it was high ropes instructions, facilitating team building programs. And I was doing that as I was trying to figure out, okay, what's my path? But as I was working for some amazing companies around the GTA, I started to realize, I feel like there's something that I could offer that's a little different. I'm learning a ton, and I have huge respect for who I'm working for, but I feel like there's some pieces that I could potentially offer. And at that time, I had a few folks that I think were decision makers in organizations and were willing to put some trust in me. And it's funny, I look back and think, oh my gosh, what were they thinking? Like, I knew nothing. But I finally decided to kind of, register the business and start this. At the time, it was called the Frontier Group. It was this small company that did team building and leadership development. And again, I was in my early 20s, so it is quite.
It's a leap of faith.
It's a huge leap of faith. And
did you go cold turkey? Hey, I've got this thing set up now. I'm done. Like, tell me
funny,
about
Chris,
how you ended that.
I did, and I mean, I got married a little bit later in life. So at the time, I literally just had to pay rent, and I knew if I could pay rent, I was good to go.
It's the best time to take a risk.
I was able to say, I think I can do this. I was excited about the idea of starting something up on my own, and I, again, had just a couple connections that were willing to take a leap of faith with me. So I was able to kind of get some revenue through the company. And yeah, we just, it's so interesting because at the time, you're printing out your own business cards, you're, trying to learn how to make a web page on your own, and come up with some kind of product and programming that you felt was unique and reflective of kind of your take on leadership and teams. So it was a grind, and it was a hustle. And it's so interesting because I remember in those first few years, I had, a couple moments where I thought, what, maybe I'll get a side job. I remember, this is dating me, but looking at, ads in the paper and applying to, one of the banks for a job that I felt like I was very qualified for, didn't get the job, didn't even get the interview, and devastated. But I look back and I'm so grateful I didn't. I think had I at that time, that literally may have just been the safe path to go down.
For sure.
So, there's a little bit of thankfulness for unanswered prayers, right? It's an experience that at the time, because I didn't have a lot of dependents, I didn't have a mortgage to pay, I was able to just kind of go for it.
Tell me, did you keep your parents in the loop? Because, I'll share quickly my experience. I remember when my partner Sean and I were leaving the other business, starting our own thing, and I'll never forget calling home. I come from a very, safe union. Mom was a teacher, dad was a mechanic and a farmer. And the whole, the conversations growing up were get a good job, so you don't have to work as hard as we did, or so you're doing different and create your own opportunity. And I remember calling them saying, hey, we're going to start this thing, and and it was almost radio silence. And I felt at the time, I'm like, this doesn't feel supportive. They were just scared. And I probably was too. But did you keep your parents in the loop of this?
I did the best I could. They there's some similarities. You know, my dad is a welder, mom was a stay-at-home mom. The idea of, you know, pursuing entrepreneurship and, you know, specifically doing leadership development and team building, like it was just it was a hard thing to relate and communicate. I would say, looking back, you know, now that I have kids, it gives me perspective. Like, I feel like they were incredibly supportive. They certainly, like, my dad would often use language like a fallback plan, and it would offend me and, you know, trigger me.
Yeah.
And
I don't need that.
I'm looking back thinking, you know, they were pretty darn supportive. You know, not only that, when I bought my first house, they were willing to co-sign. Like, they were more than supportive, knowing that it really was a world that was pretty new to them. And, you know, it's your kids' kind of launch. So you want it to be, I think, pretty successful and safe. And I wasn't taking completely a safe path. But they were great. And I still don't really think they have a clue what I do. But they're big fans.
That's so cool. I appreciate sharing that. The first year, did you make any money?
Oh, and you know what? I kept a folder, and I've kept a folder of like my marketing materials and the programs I launched. And it's funny, we onboarded a new staff member just 6 months ago, and we always pull out the folder, and it becomes just this hour of laughter of like,
sure.
I can't believe we were selling that and promoting that. But again, at the time, you have such confidence and excitement around these things. So we would have had a number of years of extremes, like a few incredible breakthroughs where, you know, you were blown away by this door that opened, the revenue came in, you're doing work that's having great impact. And, you know, Chris, I could show you some programs and some launches we did that I was so confident in and so excited about that were just abysmal failures. And all of that was the story. So I was incredibly fortunate. A great friend of mine that I went to school with that was trained and educated to be a teacher, realized as well that teaching wasn't going to be her path. So Claudia ended up joining kind of the team when there was no team. And we've been working predominantly together for the last almost, 28 years. But I had somebody early on that I felt was, all in to the adventure and to take some risks. And
it's a leap of faith.
It really was. But we were able to kind of do a lot of, work together, which also made the journey a lot more enjoyable. And I think got you through the really hard times.
Yeah. Speaking of that, were there ever any moments where you thought, like, I don't know if this is actually, you were worried about your plan?
Oh, there were, for sure. There were a few times. I think there were a few times when, especially in the kind of mid to upper 20s, where folks that have kind of went a more traditional path. So I graduated again with a bunch of accountants that all of a sudden are getting the jobs that I had dreamed of, and people talking about partnerships, and you're still every now and then paying your payroll on your credit card thinking, oh my gosh, like, am I actually moving forward?
Yeah.
And those were the moments where it was definitely hard. And when I was able to stand back, it was super clear that the adventure of entrepreneurship I'm wired for. And there's very rarely a day that I don't really love that adventure. I remember so many years ago, someone told me the proverb, comparison is a thief of joy. And, it would be like a top 3 to 5 quote for me, because I had to really be careful not to get into that comparison mode. Because in terms of success and, starting to, be able to have a house, and then all these things that you kind of expect are going to come, that came a little bit later for me, because it was a grind for a good, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that's what it takes, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. What a journey. Fast forward to what the work you're doing now, how you're helping clients, and I think, most importantly for me is, what's the favorite part of what you do?
Those are great questions. So, the through line in my work has been leadership development and making teams resilient and work well together. As I said, that started more on the outdoor adventure, team bonding side. That has evolved, and yet I still, although it's more in a classroom setting, focus on those things. And I just love working with groups. I love working with leaders. I love, I find often, especially the leaders I work with, they really want to make a difference and they really want to have impact. And leadership is a daunting role, and to be able to lead teams and show up well and make great decisions, you need someone in your corner and you need to be equipped. So being able to be that kind of trusted advisor, to be someone who, just is a guide to help folks kind of stay in the right course, I love that. Sometimes it's in serious coaching conversations, but often it's in really fun training experiences where we can sit back and, actually take some time to learn about what's not working, what is working, what steps forward look like. So the work I do, I love. Now, what's interesting is, as I said earlier, I started in kind of this field of team building and leadership development, but the whole time I was trying to figure out, is there something specific that I might be able to offer? And at that time, I would say I was a bit stuck in a few areas, not only vocationally, but even personally. I had done kind of I call it the either or road really well. I was raised in a pretty even restrictive, conservative upbringing, so I knew right from wrong. I was an accountant, so I knew how to get the right answer. And all of that served me well in some areas. But I also recognized that in life, in leadership, in teams, sometimes you deal with situations that are right and right. In 92, I read a book by who is a whole other podcast episode, but became a friend and a mentor, Dr. Barry Johnson. He wrote a book called Polarity Management. And the book talked about the fact that life does offer problems to solve, which have either or answers. Pick the right answer and you're done. And you need that because, as I said earlier, in life, there's lots of right and wrongs. There's also those situations where they're not problems to solve, they're tensions to manage, meaning that these are situations that are ongoing. They're almost those chronic issues that in a team, someone surfaces a concern or a question. In the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh my gosh, are we still talking about this? Yeah. Those ongoing pieces. And that situation of tensions to manage, things like, how do I be optimistic? And as an entrepreneur, also realistic. How do I run my business with kind of a bottom line profit focus, but equally with a purpose focus? Communicating, how do I be someone who's super candid and truthful and at the same time tactful and diplomatic? It's not just work. In life, how do I be someone who focuses on taking care of others, but not to the neglect of myself? How do I live my life so I really embrace activity, but also embrace recovery and rest? These both end kind of scenarios, that was a new way of thinking for me. And first and foremost, literally just changed my life. Once I recognized that certain challenges in life are not either or problems, but they're both and tensions to manage, that kind of opened up a new world of thinking and leading and living. And interestingly enough, became really the piece that I have tried to bring to my clients. Most of the clients I work with, whether they're leaders of Fortune 500 giants or grassroots, local charity leaders, they're pretty good problem solvers. They know if there's a right and wrong answer, they can pick the right answer. It's these underlying tensions, these complexities that are ongoing that often hold them back. That keep them up at night. And what I've been able to do is name them and then look at how do we manage those tensions in a healthy way? What would it take to just identify a few of these key tensions that are really holding you back and not solve them because they're not going away, but learn to manage them in a healthy way. So it's almost like breathing, 22,000 times today, you're going to inhale and exhale. You can't pick a side. The moment you pick a side, you're in trouble.
That's right.
Well, with these tensions like optimism and realism and profit and purpose and truth and tact, rather than trying to pick a side or ping pong between one and the other, how do you just learn to manage it like breathing so that your leadership, your teams really start to come alive? And that, has been really the focus of my writing, my workshops, my coaching, and I love it. I just love the work. It's impacted my life, and I see it impacting my clients.
Yeah, so rewarding. I've had the pleasure of seeing you speak. You've done work with our team in multiple different ways, and you've changed the word "and" for me, or I'll say highlighted. I've really tried to remove "but," however, those things, because I think it's just really important. Now, there's a way to not use "and," but let's talk about the healthy tensions, because I think that's so prevalent right now. And let's go to flexibility and structure, because COVID changed the world, and COVID changed business. That one really, still comes to mind and is still talked about so much. How are you seeing that in large and small organizations show up?
Well, that's a great one. And I think the first thing that's really important to recognize is that as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you face two types of challenges. Problems that you can solve, where you can pick one side and be done with it. And if that's the case, definitely solve the problem. There's also, though, these tensions to manage.
Give me an example of that real quick.
Problems to solve. Are we going to use Salesforce or HubSpot for our CRM?
Tactical, strategic.
Are we going to actually scale and hire this person or not? Now, there may be great options, but you can still choose one and you're done. You move forward. There's other scenarios, though, where, like inhaling or exhaling, you can't choose one long term. When you talk about structure and flexibility, it's so fascinating that you bring that one up, because I honestly don't think there's been a week in the last 2 years that I'm not in conversations with people about that tension. Yeah. Because what happened is we came out of the pandemic, and organizations are expecting, employees are expecting more flexibility than ever before. And flexibility is a great thing. Flexibility, I would even say in my small business, we've learned how to embrace flexibility as a bit of a winning edge. But flexibility only works when it's in tension with some core structures. When we're clear on what are our non-negotiables. And although we want to embrace uniqueness and flexibility, where are we actually going to be consistent? And the more I work with organizations that are trying to embrace flexibility and what they do and how they work and even kind of scheduling, the more they're recognizing we've got to embrace key structures just as much. Yeah. And again, if it's all flexibility and no structure, it's about as successful as inhaling and holding it. You're going to be blue in the face. The goal, though, isn't to, okay, pandemic's over, we're going to swing back to structure. Well, that just won't work. It's not an effective strategy, and you won't attract and retain great people.
Yeah, it's not tolerated.
So what I would say right now is, rather than, and Chris, how many times have you looked at headlines of another Fortune 500 organization, coming up with these sweeping post-COVID policies? Now, this is the way
mandate
we
back.
Work.
Yeah.
And they're not working because this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We've got to decide for us right now in this season, how are we managing flexibility and structure? And that may not look the same 6 months from now. But what we want to do is get the full benefits of each side. And the more we want to embrace flexibility, the more we cannot let our eye off of structure and be clear on, as much as these things are flexible, these things are actually non-negotiables. That would be one. Another one that's actually, it's kind of like the first cousin to that, I would say, is the tension between collaboration and independence. In effective teams, both matter. We need to collaborate and learn from each other and kind of work off each other's strengths and get the energy and ideation that comes from togetherness. And we just need to put our head down and get stuff done. I think through the pandemic, a lot of organizations recognize, wow, we can get stuff done and we don't even need to be together. We barely even need to talk to each other. And in some ways, it's been a great thing, because I think we've recognized we can work more independently than we thought we could.
There was a lot of inefficiencies that
100%.
were exposed through COVID.
100%.
To say, hey, we don't
and I
need
think
this office space or this amount of meetings. Or
and
this
by
amount of
embracing
structure.
healthy independence, we've had efficiencies. I think people's work-life balance has actually been able to improve. And what people are recognizing now more than ever is if it's all independence and we don't have collaboration, we're working in silos. And that creative energy that we used to have, we've lost. People who used to feel this sense of belonging are now way more apt to kind of look on job boards because we're not part of something. We're just doing our piece. So again, if you want right now to really have a competitive edge, the question is not how do we swing back to working together all the time? It's how do we leverage this tension between collaboration and independence? Because if we can continue to get the upsides of independent work, but not to the neglect of synergy and collaboration, right now, that's pretty unique. Now, again, this isn't going away. You won't solve it. I would love to be the author or the leader who could say, just do this and you're good to go. It's a work in progress. Yeah. The other thing that's interesting is that it's different for different teams. Like there's some organizations, I often use an analogy of sports teams. There's some teams that are like a hockey team, meaning that for us to work well, we're passing back and forth all the time. There's lots of changes and real-time kind of teams. So, often creative teams are like that. They actually need to be together more. They need more collaboration. There's other teams that are like relay teams. My team would be like this, meaning that we actually work pretty independently, but those handoffs, that baton pass, it's got to be solid. Yeah. And if it's not, everything falls apart. So the question is, okay, how do we manage collaboration and independence so that we do that well? There's some teams that are like gymnastics teams, meaning that we're highly independent. My daughter's a gymnast. And
timely example too.
Totally. And I mean, it's interesting because in a gymnastics team, you actually compete against your team members, but you still need collaboration. You still need to support. You still need to work off of each other's learning. So and this is often the case with like a national sales teams, highly independent, but we still need collaboration. So not how do we solve this problem? It's how do we manage that tension for the unique team that we are?
It's amazing. Great examples too. Tim, how many people come to you and say, Tim, we need you because you've got to fix this? And what's your reaction to that? Versus we got some things going on and some great people and we need a little help. Because I think those could be two different clients.
They are two different clients. That's a great question. I will say a couple things. One is I have worked with teams of all shapes, sizes around the world, from literally small local nonprofits to the United Nations, Fortune 500 organizations to local nonprofits. So I can tell you with confidence, no one's totally figured it out. Yeah. I've never worked with an organization that doesn't have some challenge in terms of how they work together. There's always a bit of dysfunction, including my team. That's always going to be the case. The question is, are we getting better? Do we feel like we're actually a little bit more aligned today than we were a quarter ago? Do we feel like there's a little bit more ownership, a little bit more kind of synergy than there was before? And if you would feel like generally things are moving in the right direction, high five. Like that's something to celebrate. Organizations that call us saying, hey, we don't got it all figured out, but we got a good thing going here. We got good people. We just need to continually invest in making sure we don't lose that and make sure we're going in the right direction. That would be the vast majority of who I work with.
Great.
And I feel like that's a great fit for us. When someone calls in total crisis, often, a leadership development program or a team development program isn't going to fix things because you usually have structural issues or you have, there's issues in terms of the market where you need to do much higher level work than just a quick team building program or a leadership. Sure. So I often am in the conversation saying, based on what you're saying, I am more than happy to come alongside and support you in a small way, but this will not fix what you're saying. The issues you're dealing with have systemic structural issues. You've got, you need business consulting, and that's not gonna be what you get in a 3-hour program.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
There's things you can't fix.
Absolutely.
Have you ever walked away either before or after you've done work with someone and just said, this isn't a fit because you could maybe tell from the leader or the person calling you in that they could be one of the core issues?
Yeah, I'm going to be transparent that that's a hard one for me. And it'd be funny if you had my team here, because they would really speak up at this point, because I think we should be doing more of that. Right now in my business, we have a lot of great options around leading change, team effectiveness, leadership development. So normally, if you are chatting with me, I can steer you down the right path. When someone says, yeah, but we actually want a little bit of a different path, the 23-year-old startup kind of mind clicks and like, of course, we'll do anything because we've got to pay rent. And we're at a place where that's the worst thing we can do.
Sure.
You know, the best thing we can do is like, you know what? If these options aren't really in line and you're looking for kind of that, my job is to help you find that somewhere else.
Sure.
And we're at a place now where we do that often, because what I find, and I mean, I can validate this story after story, if we ever, you know, we're fortunate that we generally exceed expectations with our clients. If we ever feel like something was just a bit off, it's because we actually got out of our lane. And we're willing to just kind of make anything work because someone really pushed us to do something that wasn't really our sweet spot. So we're in a season for sure, and I'm in a season where I am more clear than ever on what we do, and we want to do it incredibly well, which means we're also clear on what we don't do. So I would say that I would say no to work more now than ever before, and it's still hard every single time. Because again, when you start something up, you know, from a basement apartment, it's a hard thing to do. Now, there has been a few client experiences where, we've had to recognize that I don't think this is a fit for us. And that's for a wide array of reasons. It's pretty rare though. Yeah. It's pretty rare.
I appreciate sharing that.
There's, you know, most people, even in some super dysfunctional teams, most people are trying their best. And, you know, sometimes being able to come alongside someone who's feeling pretty beat up is helpful, even if the situation is pretty dire. Yeah.
So this is I'll call it your day-to-day, but you have a whole other gig you're doing right now. You're writing books. How many books have you written? You've got three or four.
I've got fourth coming out this fall.
Amazing material. I've read them all. We'll talk about them at the end and where people can find them. But now you're doing a lot of speaking. And in front of crowds of hundreds, if not thousands. How's that experience been?
It's been great. It's fascinating because I don't have the exact year, but I think it was around 26, 27. You know, I was having some really great success facilitating groups and doing team building programs all over the world. And in my mind, I thought, I'd really like to add to kind of our roster more keynotes and speaking. And I remember I had a client that said, hey, we're doing this big event in Toronto. It's an all-staff event. Would you want to be our lunchtime speaker? Like, I'd love that. So I was so excited that I reached out to a speaking agency in Toronto and said, hey, I've got this big event in Toronto. One of your agents may want to sit in the back, and we'll chat after and, you know, kind of see if we could work together. So
great. So it's part of the playbook.
Totally. Happened, did the keynote, and I saw the agent in the back, didn't know her. And a couple days later, we had our call, and to my surprise, she said, I don't think you'd be what we're looking for.
Really?
I know. And I was
ouch.
That stung.
Hurts, yeah.
But she said, you know, you have to recognize, Tim, and I didn't know this at the time. And the funny thing is, her name's Kelly. I got to know her down the road. She didn't owe this to me. I didn't know her. But she said, facilitating groups and keynote speaking are totally different skill sets. And I have a hunch you're probably pretty strong at facilitating. You got some work to do on the keynote side.
Okay.
And then she went as far as to say, if you want this to be part of your career, here's a few key areas I'd really focus on in the next few years. So
and is that specific to the work or the
specifically
stories you're
around
talk about?
Learning how to effectively be a speaker.
So the art of.
Yeah. So years pass, and you know, now we're talking almost 15, 16 years later. My first book's coming out, and I'm doing an event in Toronto, and I knew that this speaking agency is there. So it was so challenging, but I reached out again and said, I've got a book coming out. But I had worked hard on working on those skills. Again, someone at the back sitting. But we chatted a few days later, and they said, you know what, I think this is going to be a great fit.
Oh,
and
good for you. That's awesome.
It was, and now the interesting thing is keynote speaking is well over half of my work now. It's the biggest part of the work I do. I love it. I think I still love the workshops. I have some clients that I work with in an ongoing way. I know people so well and closely, but the speaking's fun because you're able to kind of throw the net wide, and you know that there's going to be a few folks in this crowd that this is what they need to hear today. And I may not even see them again, but this is kind of what they need today. And I love that I get to do that. And so it's a big part of the work I do. I think also, as you continue to grow and evolve, it's just fun to have a new thing. I have to be careful because I can get caught up in the shiny new object and, change things too much. But when something strategically has been part of the vision and you start to see it come to fruition, and you get to focus on that, it's been fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you're incredible. Again, I've had the pleasure of seeing you speak. I also saw your June schedule of as far as like across North America. How difficult is that? We spoke about this, but how difficult is that on family life? Because you're away a lot.
Yeah, so it is, and it's funny, as a person who's written multiple books on managing tension, the work-home tension is one that we have to actively manage because it will not manage itself by chance. Yeah. It has to be done by choice and focus. In the work I do, there's kind of in our world conference season, which is generally April, May, June, and then September, October, November. Okay. So you got half the year that is high, conference season. And as you probably saw, in June, I could be on a plane, 3-4 times in 1 week. So we're delivering often at least 4 programs a week. And that is a challenge at home. So a couple things. One thing that's been huge for me is I have learned a magical phrase. Let me get back to you. Let me get back to you.
Go ahead and
magical
write that one
words.
down.
And what that means is everything that comes through, I always pause, not to just look at, does that fit in the calendar, but to actually pause to say, does that fit with our values and with life? Yeah. Because I also have, a gymnastics tournament that weekend, or my kids' hockey tournament, or Becky's doing a course and I want to be home. So let me get back to you just gives me a moment to actually have a quick chat at home to say, does this fit for us? And what we found is that, we also want to be able to embrace work when it's there. So, Becky and the kids know I'm away a lot in the spring and the fall, but I also work probably less than half time in the summer. And we have done some amazing international adventures long-term as a family in the off season. So we're trying to manage it well. Again, there's no magical formula. The work-life balance is a dynamic balance. What works right now may not even work 6 months from now. But we have to focus on it all the time. Yeah, I also love traveling with work. I find it super fun. So
and you brought your kids to speaking events?
Well, yeah, I've got a 12 and a 14-year-old. Yeah. So what's been really cool is now I'm often bringing a kid with me. So if we're doing something cool awesome. Across the country or across the world, I just grab an extra plane ticket. And yeah, it's been some really cool one-on-one time. And
what do they say after they get to hear you speak?
You do this for a living?
they
see the hotels
for that,
and they see it. And I'm like, there is hard work behind it.
The lavish. Like you got paid what for talking for an hour?
Exactly.
That's easy, Dad.
But it's been fun. It's been fun for them to get a little peek into my world. And it's been a great way, again, to manage this tension between work and home because it's an ongoing one that we're always. I don't want to just settle for doing okay at work and okay at home. The question is, I'm not going to solve it, but I want to feel like I'm doing well at both. And that takes work. And right now, with the kids, at the age they're at, with the business really thriving and growing, it takes a lot of effort.
Both sides. Worth it. Yeah, amazing. You've been a huge inspiration for me and our family in a lot of ways, and specifically that was around taking a month and going to travel. I mean, our kids are 3 and 7 months now, so we've started to even dabble. I mean, 2 years ago it was 3.5 weeks away and just in Florida, and then last year, this year, but it's really been a sort of a guiding light to say, hey, we're going to try this because it's different, it's difficult, it's not easy, but we want to build a life around where we can do that. So I appreciate you setting the bar for that, of being able to manage those two areas, because it's not easy.
It's not, and it also comes down to kind of values and priorities. I mean, Becky and I, when we were even dating, we recognized one of our biggest shared values was travel, and the idea of kind of how do we integrate that into the adventure ahead of us. At one point, it was we were going to live abroad for a while, but then as we started to navigate that, we thought the problem with that is that then it's done. So what we've tried to do since the kids, I think the youngest, my youngest was 6 when we started. We're trying to do a month abroad every other year, and COVID definitely got in the way of that.
Sure.
But we have had some great adventures, and we talk about it all the time. The prioritization of that time, even kind of figuring out budgets so that we make that work, we wouldn't trade it for anything. Yeah. They have just been the most amazing experiences. I think our kids learn as much or more than they would, miss at school. So yeah, it's been fun, and it's interesting now because we're recognizing, with my oldest being 14, like our window is starting to close. So we got to really work hard to keep this up, because it's not going to be long, and they're
limited time, and they're on their way. And I love the fact, and one thing I appreciate about it is just going sort of against the grain, where life tells you, well, these are the things you should do, and you run a business and you have obligations. So going away a month is probably not the thing to do. But
yeah, it doesn't. You have to decide, how am I managing this tension? What are the values that are driving it? And this also means that, there's seasons where the family knows that, dad's going to be away a bit more, and there's a bit of a hustle month, but that means that we're able to kind of get away for 3 or 4 weeks. I will also say, making those decisions with, my partner, Becky, makes all the difference, because together we're saying, okay, there's no right or wrong answer here, but what's the best answer for us this year? Yeah. And okay, let's do that. Let's kind of lead with those values.
It's great. How much did kids change your leadership once you became a father?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. I think 2 things would be true for me. One is, I think one of the most important tensions to manage as a leader is confidence and humility. I think that great leaders are confident. Leadership means that you've got to be able to say, hey, I've got something, this is proven, you can follow me, you can trust me, and they're equally humble. And humility isn't this kind of assumption we're wrong, it's just that growth mindset, that ability to always learn and be curious. And when I think of the best leaders I've ever worked for or with, they were not a little bit of both. They were highly humble and highly confident. I would say parenting has definitely increased my humility. It has, I think.
It's the hardest job out there.
It is, and it's just this reality that I can read 8 million books and I still don't have the answers. And, there's things that I play a role, I have a piece to play, but the outcome's out of my control. And there's something about that is deeply humbling, I think, in a healthy way. So that would be one, is I think that, parenting has been an amazing adventure and journey for Becky and I, and incredibly humbling. The other, I think the one thing that I probably didn't expect was how hardwired they come. Like you feel like your parenting approach and strategy makes all the difference, and absolutely it has a role to play. And I think what you model and what you value impacts their entire life. And there's a lot that you're just along for the ride. Like I raised my 2 in somewhat similar ways, but they couldn't be more different. And there's a hard wiring that they have even before they can walk and talk that really has blown me away. And I feel like I've recognized that also just of people. Like I work with leaders, I work with teams, and I think that, the goal, I think, in being our best is not changing who we are, because we are who we are at this point. It's how do we be the best version of ourselves? How do we, recognize that I have strengths, I have weaknesses, that's not going to change. But what I want to do is understand and leverage those strengths, and also recognize that those weaknesses need to be managed, because they may not change, but I don't want them to impact others in a negative way. I don't want them to hold me back. And I think, having kids has even exemplified that for me, that, it's less about changing who you are. It's more about how do we make you the best version of who you are. Those would be two definite lessons and gifts that I think having two knuckleheads at home has helped me with.
I love it. I think before I had our first, I was like, Tim, I'm having a kid. I need help. Like, I know this is going to change a lot, but I loved what you said about growth mindset in leadership, and for the ability for people to go say, like, I just don't have all the answers, and I'm okay with that. But that's a beautiful statement. You do a lot of work in the community, and specifically in Niagara. I want to talk to you about, or I want to chat about your experience at Southridge Shelter, and then the work that you've done in marginalized communities here, and specifically with the migrant workers.
Sure.
It's inspirational. I think people have only a small understanding of the impact you have on what you do. What got you involved?
Yeah, so this was a bit of a unexpected career 180 for me. So my original company was doing well. I had run it for about 10 years, and unexpectedly got an offer for it to be purchased by a competitor. And right at that time, I was just starting to do more volunteer work in the area of homelessness. At that time, the Southridge Homeless Shelter was just kind of opening its doors and getting on its feet. So I was super involved in volunteering there. That was a brand new world for me, but one that really started to awaken a lot of excitement and energy, and in some ways even entrepreneurial thinking in me. So at that time, I ended up selling the company, and I thought, you know what, I'm ready to make a huge change. So I decided to walk into the director position at Southridge. I would have thought that was an opportunity for me for a year or two just to kind of help get things going in the right direction. But it turned out to be a 9-year chapter in my career. So wow. I was director at Southridge. At the time, it was just a small little homeless shelter. Now, it's the biggest provider of homelessness services in the Niagara region. And then as the years progressed, and we started to work in other communities across the region, we started to recognize that not every community has homelessness issues, but every community has marginalized communities. Every community has marginalized populations, folks who are excluded or ignored. Sometimes it's a little harder to find than others. But as we started to work in other neighborhoods, we had different outreach programs. And I live in Lincoln, in kind of the tender fruit area, the grape growing area of the region. Sometimes you could look around and think, wow, everything's perfect in this area.
It's beautiful.
But again, just look a little closer. And what you find is that in all those amazing wineries and farms, they're normally staffed by temporary foreign workers, offshore workers, predominantly from the Caribbean. Now there's a lot of actually Mexican workers, but men and women who leave their communities, their families, for 6 months, 8 months every year to come and help out on our farms to help our economy thrive. And these folks are generally so happy to be here. They're happy to make money and kind of contribute to their family, help their kids go to school, but often very excluded. They often have situations where they're living in small buildings on the farm. They don't have great access to transportation. Although they're entitled to health care, they often can't get to the health care they're entitled to. Even social relational exclusion, the ability to kind of connect with friends and neighbors. So what we started to do, and it was myself and some friends and volunteers and neighbors and people like yourself as the years passed, question, okay, what could we do to just help someone who's excluded feel like they're more in the circle, and that started with a handful of volunteers, but now we have about 200 volunteers.
Wow.
That rally around the thousands of migrant farm workers in a variety of ways. We have a wonderful group of volunteer doctor and nurses that have health clinics on Sunday evenings when the men can access, that provide incredible confidential health care. We have a cricket league, a soccer league. We have a ton of volunteers that just do friendly visitation. They just go to farms, get to know folks by name, have backyard barbecues, just tons of ways just to help reach out. And the cool thing is, we have a farm that has 7 men from Jamaica. Some of those men have been coming to the same farm every year, for 15, 16, 17 years. But over the course of the last number of years, they've just become great friends and neighbors to us. I know that my kids, specifically my son, can't wait for the next time we have them for a barbecue, because it means he gets to play soccer with them all night in the backyard. It's just a great way to reach out to people who are looking for just a little bit of inclusion and connection. So, yeah, it's been great even to team up with you on some of these adventures. And again, I think it's been a really cool way to look at how we don't need to be social service professionals or trained experts to make a massive difference in the lives of others. We just need to actually carve out a bit of time and look for opportunities in our backyard.
Yeah, and ironically, that was how you and I met through an initiative through City St. Catharines. I mean, and the biggest takeaway for me in that part of when we first met and the work you do now, and just, again, allowing me the opportunity to get involved on a very small level, but it's not just about, hey, here's a check, or let me donate this, or, that's needed, and I think that's important, but, to what you're saying is just leaning in and where friendship and community is needed. Mm-hmm. And I was blown away just at the amount of workers that we have here, the extremes of living conditions, from 12 guys with a cement floor and curtain rods hanging, where you'd walk in and some people wouldn't have their dog stay there, is the reality, over to a farm that's just built a brand new house with 8 rooms in it. And that was the part that was really eye-opening. But it's the same smiling faces and incredible people on both sides of that, no matter what. And, for us, whether it was the ability we took the guys out to the restaurant the one night, or at Brand donating samples that are going to go to somewhere anyway, or back to a supplier, just little ways like that had such huge impact. And the smiles on their faces, just opening the boxes, knowing they're going to send stuff back to their family. There's more in that work and giving than you could ever get anywhere else.
Yeah, and again, I think I honestly believe that the vast majority of people really want to make a difference. Obviously, you want to make a difference through your work and your family, with your friends, but you want to go beyond that, because I think most of us know that we're pretty blessed to live where we live. We have incredible opportunities. So there's a little bit of, how do I use that to make a difference? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in, well, I'm not trained, or I don't know where to start. And, I often say, just kind of a couple things. Look around, because in any community, in any street, there's some unmet need. There's the single mom that would love a night out if she had a little bit of support. There's someone who could really use maybe a ride somewhere. Like, there's something that you can do. And what's even better is if you can link it to things that you enjoy. So look at simple ways that you can make a difference. And I think the other piece, and I have this, my wife gives me so much grief over this, but I have this little kind of worksheet I do to start my week. And it just gets me back to my values and my goals, and even the kind of plan of the week. But there's always a part that talks about, what is the way I'm going to give back this week. And
that's amazing.
Well, all it does, Chris, is it forces me to put something on the calendar, because it's not that I don't want to. It's that if you don't kind of think, what's a way I can make a difference? And that doesn't mean I have to serve at a shelter or go to a farm. It could be, I'm going to actually reach out to, I have some really good friends, and they've had an in-law in the hospital. I'm going to bring them a meal. Or it could be simple things, but it's just to pause and say, what is one way that I can really try to use my time, my treasures, my talents, to just make a little bit of a difference. And there's never a week where I'm racking my brains for ideas.
No,
it's a matter
so much right in front of
where
us.
do you stop? But it's just like, hey, if I can put something on the calendar And ideally now it involves my family. That's a huge win.
Yeah, and then a year later, you've got 52 amazing things that you've done
Absolutely.
for people, small, big, whatever they are. So I think that's a great tool that anyone can walk away with and use and start tomorrow.
Yeah.
I love that. What advice would you give 30-year-old Tim?
It's just interesting that you talk about 30-year-old Tim, because in my 30s, I started to kind of do a little bit of personal work on things that I think was getting me stuck relationally, and even in terms of like fully showing up well in life. So it was in my early 30s that I went to counseling for a while, that I started to not just have friends to hang out with, but to have an inner circle that I was kind of open and honest with. So I think one thing is I would say, like, don't skip that step. Like, there's a point, and I think it has to be different for different people, but where you have to recognize that regardless of who you are, there's work to be done on you. And, make sure you do the hard work so that you can actually enjoy the life that you're given. And so one is, I just would say, don't skip that step. Do the work you need to do. Don't kind of hide what you probably should be facing. And also let one or two people in. I'm not talking about posting all of your challenges on social media. I'm talking about one or two close inner circle friends in on your journey. And I remember once I was out, it was in my early 30s with a good buddy. And this is a wedding party friend, but I was trying to explain some of the challenges I was working through and that I was kind of seeing this counselor. And my friend paused and said, just so you know, like, you show me all your stuff's together, Tim, most of the time, but it's this person is the only person I really want to hang out with.
Wow.
I'm just like, oh, that's good to know. And I think there's an element of you need one or two people in your life, especially as an entrepreneur. Like, when we're building businesses and when we're pitching and selling, like, we've got to really show up well. And sometimes that means that we've got, polished social media, and that's part of it. But the reality is all of us have something in our life that's broken, and that's okay. The question is, how do I not have shame around that thing? And how do I just recognize that I'm always going to be a work in progress? Do the work I need to do, but also have a few people that are with me in that journey. Because if I always feel like I'm performing, I actually start to feel disingenuous. And I think, right now we need authentic leaders that aren't perfect, but that are working to be really healthy.
Yeah, great advice to 30-year-old Tim and the rest of us. So thank you. I appreciate that. Vulnerabilities, as you're explaining that, is the thing that comes to mind for me. And I love Brené Brown's work. And when you talk about a group, I was super fortunate, I think 2012, to get involved in Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, and got part of this forum group. And there's 4 or 5 of us that are still not involved with EO, but on a bi-monthly basis, meeting, connecting, and just everything's on the table. Yeah. And people that can challenge you and love you and support you. And I recently made a post about that, and I just think it's so powerful to have that close group that you can just be you. Mm-hmm. And they are there to support, but there to also say, hey, you're not being you. Yeah. You're out of alignment. Yeah,
it's great. I think it was thought leader Adam Grant that I took note of that said, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you need one or two people that are both your biggest cheerleader and your biggest challenger. Yeah. And you need to almost let them know that you need both of those things. And sometimes you can say, you know what, I just need a bit of encouragement right now. But also to be able to say, hey, don't hold back. Like, I don't need you to just kind of raise me up when I need a kick in the pants.
Yeah.
And if you've got one or two of those folks in your corner in an ongoing way, I feel like that makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Tim, how do we find your work? How do we learn more about you? You've got actually books here today, which is amazing, but where do we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for asking that. I think the easiest way to kind of learn more about me and the work I do is just quite simply timarnold.ca. So timarnold.ca, not com. You'll learn a bit more about my workshops and keynotes. There's also easy access to my books. My books are all on Amazon. You'll have them in a couple of days. And some recent work that I've done in the articles. So timarnold.ca, I think you'll find everything you need, and can also get in touch with me if you want to expand these conversations.
Good. I was going to ask if someone wants to dive further, we can set up a call with you or your team.
And I would hang out mostly on LinkedIn, a little bit on Instagram, but that's about the extent of my social engagement.
Love it. Tim, you have an incredible story. You're an incredible human. I'm just so fortunate to have you in my life. So thanks for being here and sharing your time today.
I have
Appreciate
loved
it.
every minute of it, and thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Appreciate it.